And we're live, hanging
draft.
out
Nice.
with Lester A. Wiltfong Jr.
I'm here. The
Anything
draft
happened recently with the Bears? Is there a reason why we're here?
You know, for the article part of this, I always put an article up on the site for those that don't do YouTube and Twitter and whatever. But I posed a question: is this the most important draft in Bears history? Right? I mean, I think on paper right now it has to be. Yeah, right. I mean, this is, Bears are all in on Caleb.
I think anytime you got that like 2 top 10 picks situated, I mean, it's such a unique.
Yeah,
unique's probably not the right word because it's happened before, but it's such a rare opportunity to really rebuild your team, and of course we've talked about it a little bit, but having that quarterback class where there's a rare prospect that comes out. Imagine if the Bears had 2 top 10 picks and were in need of a quarterback 2 years ago, and Kenny Pickett was the best quarterback, right? That was the year I went to the Senior Bowl. And everybody always wants to talk about the quarterbacks. Well, how the quarterbacks look, and I was like, not impressive. Not impressive. Kenny Pickett can't throw a ball that cuts through the wind in Mobile, Alabama. I don't know that he's going to be able to do it in Pittsburgh, right? And so, not that I knew he was going to Pittsburgh, but in hindsight, after he was drafted, right? And it's just there's a little bit of luck involved in sports, and that was the big thing on social. Well, the Bears got lucky. Yeah,
okay,
that happens, man. they were very fortunate with the Lovie Smith 4th and 20 Texans thing that led to them getting the top pick. That led to them being able to trade it to the Panthers. They were lucky that the Panthers were aggressive and went for it, and that they were so bad, and that they were willing to give up a major piece that would have probably helped a guy like Bryce Young. They were lucky there. They were lucky that they entered a year with a great quarterback at the top. I mean, all of this has felt lucky. Sure, sometimes you'll take the luck, especially when you've experienced decades of bad luck.
Yeah, the flip side is there. I mean, you look at all the times there's just a bad bounce or a really bad thing happened in the draft. I mean, the Bears are 1 pick from Aaron Donald, you know what I mean, in the draft one time. I mean, the ball has not bounced the Bears' favor in a long time. I mean, the double doink. I mean, there's always instances throughout recent history in Chicago, where they got the bad end of the luck stick. And here we are. Things are breaking Chicago's way. We thought it was happening a couple years ago when they got Justin Fields fell to them. Just didn't work out right how we hoped. This is a different situation. Ryan Poles came in and said, "Hey, I'm making this team over in my image. This is how I want my team to look." And the Bears took their lumps, and he made some sad fans along the way. But I think that eventually, like I said, on paper, this has the chance to be one of the most fantastic drafts. I mean, when's the last time the Bears had 2 picks this early? I mean,
well, I think it was the
Butkus Sayers. Is that what we're going to
draft?
Come on, 2 Hall of Famers, 2 Hall of Famers,
65, I believe, and actually it was 3 top 10 picks. The third player signed with the AFL.
That's right. I remember that. Okay, see.
I believe he signed with the Chargers, if my memory serves me correctly.
We got a comment here right away in the crowd about the it's lucky that Pete Carroll vetoed the Russell Wilson trade. There's little things, man, like what's the butterfly effect? This little thing could happen, and this happens.
You got a hurricane.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, again, to kind of prove the point a little further, the Bears and the Steelers were tied at the top of the draft, in the 70s. And they flipped a coin, and the Steelers won. And so they drafted Terry Bradshaw. Yeah. And people say, "Oh, Terry Bradshaw wasn't that good." Terry Bradshaw was a good quarterback in the 70s. He was a really good prospect, and he really turned that franchise around. Like, until then, the Steelers were kind of a laughingstock. Yeah. And there's a number of situations that are similar, right? I mean, you could just go to the Trubisky draft. They got a 1 in 3 chance of taking Mahomes, and they don't take him, right? I mean, there's things like that have happened, but this is one of those situations where, the Peyton Manning, the Peyton Manning draft, they were going to have the top pick through like 14 weeks. Yeah. And then they just decided to go on a little winning spree at the end of the year and take themselves out of the Peyton Manning sweepstakes. And they beat like a playoff team like down the stretch. It's just there's just some frustrating things that have happened, and this just happens to be another team just completed the losing streak for them so that they could just launch in and be able to get this first pick. And then it was just such a no doubt process. I mean, I think is all of the noise and all of the people that were spreading, I think, misinformation and disinformation. Some of that happens from other teams, right? You want to like sow doubt. You want to say, "Oh boy, I don't like the way that this guy's cut out because maybe you should let him slide so that Washington could take him." Right? Like there's a lot of that kind of happens, and then I think that there's just an amount of this current media, social media, and whatever, where it's really easy, where you see like a lie gets circulated super fast and thousands of times, right? And then all of a sudden everybody's seen it and it's kind of impressed in their head. That happened on like Bears players had a misconception of what Caleb Williams is all about.
Did you
right?
catch the Cole Kmet interview recently?
The Cole Kmet interview, the Jalen Johnson, quote where he's got to get rid of that Hollywood stuff, right? And it's like, where did you get that, Jalen? Right? Like, what is that? Doesn't really seem to vibe with what we've seen and what we've heard, particularly now. But I think all these guys are influenced by this, and that they're kind of surface level too. Until these guys get in the league and they meet him, how else would they know?
I thought it was fantastic process by the Bears. The way they did the whole thing where they had Caleb come in and they had to go out to dinner with the players. I mean, because like you said, there are a lot of things out there people heard and they thought, and there was these notions of he's a diva or he's this or he's a bad guy or he's all about himself and he's selfish. And then, okay, well, let's meet him, but have him meet the leaders of this team first, and let's see what they have to say about him. And it just was great process, and we saw what happened there. The process looking for quarterbacks started and ended with Caleb. The Bears vetted him and figured this out pretty damn quick. And they're like, yeah, that's it. We don't need to look at Jalen, at Daniels, Drake May. No, we got our guy. Everyone knew it. And it was awesome.
So I'm gonna hit up a couple comments here before we get started. We're to make sure that Jacob Infante gets here because we want to make sure that we get his analysis. But I'm gonna hit a couple comments before we start doing the podcast part of this. But Eric wants to know why no one's calling out Mel Kiper for giving the Bears a B on their draft. What I didn't see it. I heard secondhand, but that somebody said his reasoning behind a B was that they didn't have a lot of picks, which is a really poor reasoning to knock somebody down. And particularly when they did so well in the picks that they used. And this was definitely a quality over quantity approach here. And particularly if you take a step back and you say like, oh, well, they used that second rounder on Montez Sweat, who's a really good player. And they used that fourth rounder on Keenan Allen, who's a really good player. Like, oh, okay. Like they filled, holes on the roster with impact players and like Ryan Bates, who, we project to be able to step in and start at center, a guy that Ryan Poles clearly likes and values. So I think this was just sort of maybe Mel not really thinking this through all that well.
Well, I shared a roundup of the grades on Windy City Gridiron, and it's funny because with Kiper digging them for not having a big class, there were other people who gave them an A+ because they maximized the quality of the few picks they did have. So that's why they got a high grade. It's just a different philosophy. I think at the end, Mel Kiper probably looked at it and said, hey, if I give them a B, I'm one of the few guys to give them a B, and that's good for, people are going to talk about it. So here we are.
Engagement, right. Gets his name.
Here we are talking about Mel Kiper's stupid ass draft grade, and I'm sure there's part of it. I mean, because, he was pretty high on Caleb and Rome and the Bears picks the entire process. He's not like CBS's Pete Prisco, who for months now has said that Jane Daniels was his number one quarterback. He thinks he'll be the best prospect of this whole draft. That's why he kind of went the B that he did. So Kiper doing is kind of unexpected. So it's okay. I'm fine with it. The grades suck anyway. They're stupid. I think they're the worst, the dumbest thing, but fans love them. We have to do them on the site because fans eat that stuff up, but I'll never grade a class.
Clickbait to its finest. Speaking of clickbait, No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I didn't know how to segue off into Jacob and Infante. I was going to say, speaking of Mel Kiper, we have our own Mel Kiper, but then you said, the clickbait thing. And I was like, Jacob knows how to clickbait. He's modern media guy, right?
He is.
We do have him in the green room here. It looks like he's finishing up a little snack or dinner, or not quite sure exactly, but didn't want to make sure that we didn't bring him on with a mouthful of food here. But Jacob, so we haven't started the podcast yet. We're just doing the pregame hangout routine here, and I'm gonna bring you in. Are you ready? Give me a thumbs up. Okay.
There we go.
All right. So one thing we need to do is we need to make sure that, Les, we need an interview background.
We do. We got to switch.
This is not very good for our brand here. Like it covers up all of our logos. And
what if we do this one? Does this one work better? The screen layouts? Oh, there's nothing to share. I guess they're not going to work. No, this is what it is.
This is what it is. This is what we got. So I need to create like a different banner thing or a different wallpaper. Anyway.
This one? Oh, that one? I'm not a fan of that one.
Oh, yeah, wow. Yeah, that's the Zimmer. That's too, it looks fine for Jacob, but for the two old guys, there's way too much gray hair in the beard for us to be shared out to the world there.
We'll have to get our graphics guy on a new background when we have the triple box, so to speak.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. It's an off-season to-do list. We don't do a lot of interviews on this show, but I'm happy that Jacob agreed to do this one. So
of course, yeah.
How about I just walk us in here? Unless you got anything for the question and answer crowd before we get started, Jacob?
No, I think we should get going, right? And
all right. Give him like a runway, like let him warm up his vocal cords. I don't want to.
Oh, I got you.
I mean?
Jacob, was it a nice day so far on your Monday? The day after the big weekend of the draft, or you had a chance?
Did you tweet for the first time in 3 months?
So I mean, I had a good day. I started it off waking up bright and early to get my physical, so that's always fun. But yeah, I'm taking today off from watching tape. I feel like I've got a little bit of time before I can before I want to put out my 2025 mock draft, and I'm going at a leisurely pace so I don't give myself a heart attack or something. So yeah, I mean,
you were sharing clips of prospects. I think Saturday night you were sharing clips of prospects for 2025.
Yeah. No, I started watching guys the day the draft ended. So I did my undrafted free agent threads and everything, and I wrote those up for articles. I scheduled them, and then I'm like, you know what? I want to talk about guys that haven't been talked about yet. And I want to look into, because I feel like it's so easy, especially later in the draft process, to fall into your own, to fall into this, the consensus has them in the fourth round, but there isn't as much of that now with some of these prospects. So it's truly up to who do I, there's no temptation of, I'm significantly higher on this guy or I'm significantly lower on this guy. And, I think that's kind of fun for me. Maybe I'm just insane, but
both. It can be fun and you can be insane. Both things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely. And just as a heads up, I still don't have my smoke alarm.
For the love of it, Jacob! All of these podcasts, all I hear is this little chirp.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be on mute. There's something I haven't done. I'm gonna be on mute when I'm not speaking. So because I feel like there have been times where I'm just sitting there. And,
chirping.
Whether Lester's talking or Bill's talking or, JB or, when I did Taylor's, I'm just kind of, you hear the beep in the background. So that fell away from me because I was focused on getting my blood drawn and all that good stuff. And, but yeah.
Grinding tape. How could you be annoyed by a smoke alarm detector that, is out of batteries when you're grinding tape on undrafted?
Yeah. Exactly. I'm so focused on, Reddy Stewart and Theo Benedet right now that I'm just, I don't even hear all this other stuff that's going on around me. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right. Vocal cords are warmed up.
All right.
I am going to launch us into the podcast here. So let's get it on.
Let's roll.
Welcome to Bear and Balance. I'm Jeff Berckes, a writer for Windy City Gridiron, and I'm joined by the editor of that fine website, Lester A. Wiltfong Jr. Lester, the Chicago Bears got a little better this weekend. The 2024 draft is in the books. Big picture, what'd you think?
I was excited. I mean, we all knew it was going to happen at the start. We did not expect what was going to happen at 9. And things kind of fell the right way for Chicago Bears fans. And, as the draft went on, it just kept, they kept getting, good pick after good pick after good pick. The trade came up. We're like, wow, that kind of came out of nowhere. And, it was solid. I mean, this is a franchise altering draft. I mean, we have to see it play out on the field, obviously, but right now, this looks to be like it's a momentous time to be a Chicago Bears fan.
Yeah, it's hard to look back at the history of the Chicago Bears and all of the drafts and not think that this is an inflection point at the very least, and it just could be a revolutionary point based on the types of players that they got and where this team is in terms of the landing spot. This isn't like a team that earned the number 1 pick on their own right. That's just a disaster. This was a team on the up, won 7 games last year, and had that number 1 pick because they made a shrewd trade that turned into absolute gold. But as we talk about the 2024 draft, we can't do any better than bringing on the Windy City Gridiron draft expert who has 441 players, I believe I heard he worked up tape on. That is Jacob Infante. Welcome to Bear and Balance.
Thank you, JB. I appreciate it. This is my second favorite time of year. My first favorite time of year is the weekend of the draft, and my second favorite is the weekend or the week right after, because I'm finally done talking about a lot of this, not like breaking down some of the same prospects and getting into debates about the same people. Now it's just breaking down a handful of players that my favorite team selected and going from there, which that's a lot easier on me. Being able to focus on the 5 draft picks and, a handful of undrafted free agents rather than, who are potentially 200 undrafted free agent targets that the Chicago Bears could end up having. So, this is it's a fun time of year for me for sure to be able to actually know who Chicago has on the roster. The speculation's fun. The mock drafts are fun, obviously, but I think it's even more exciting, I should say, to be able to have those players on the roster and have a better understanding of exactly what to project in the next year.
Well, as a Bears fan, now you can zero in. You have the 5-man draft class. There's a handful of undrafted free agents that have been announced.
Yeah.
So 441, was that the final number you landed on for your prospects?
Yeah, so 441, that's how I finished up this year. The last guy that I ended up watching, I told Lester, was Giovanni Manu, the offensive tackle from British Columbia, the guy who ended up being a 4th-round pick for the Lions. So every year I like to play the game of who's the earliest player that gets selected that I don't have any notes on. And I would have been mad at myself if there's a 4th-round player that I didn't have notes on. So I was able to last until round 6. There was there's a linebacker out of Oregon who was, mostly like a rotational starter, special teamer in college, and he got drafted in round 6. So that was a little bit surprising to me by the Texans. But regardless, I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out. And yeah, I'm gonna try and top that number in 2025, but we'll see.
We all have to set goals. And so
Yeah.
it's nice to set your goals, big and tall, and we'll see if you can accomplish that. But let's put that off for at least a couple hours, and let's talk about this class here over the next 45 minutes to an hour, and not a couple hours. We don't have that long. But basically, for my reaction, and we can talk about a little bit of my experience at the draft as we go along here. But the Bears landed 3 of the targets that I had, and then we were all kind of cheering for the last guy as well. So the names that came through were pretty fun in a lot of ways. So I want to start at the top, and there was no drama here. Caleb Williams, quarterback, USC, becomes the number 1 overall pick. A lot of very interesting off-season talk about Caleb Williams in social media, in rumors, and fans having reactions to judging his character. I think prematurely and falsely, but there just a lot of very interesting reactions in the wave here of the Bears securing the number 1 pick, having Justin Fields then traded, and then kind of zeroing in on this guy. And the drama wasn't there. Like no one was worried about, oh, who are they going to take? Everybody knew that this was going to happen. But I want to ask Lester first. What did you think about just what did you learn about social media and fan base and just all of the surrounding noise around something like this? And is there any kind of takeaways or message that you have kind of following this up?
It was kind of an odd situation because we saw a little bit of this a couple of years ago when the Bears drafted Justin Fields. There was some weird rumors that popped up about him, but it wasn't this level. I mean, there was stuff about Caleb Williams being thrown out there, before the college season even ended, because it looked like that he was going to be the first overall pick. There was a lot of weird stuff, just floating out there. And look, I'm sure some of these scouts and guys that are vetting this stuff and trying to find this information out, they're hearing things from people they believe are credible sources. I heard some things that people that I trust that said some stuff, but it's all secondhand information, right? So as this person says something to this person, when he says it to this person, now it maybe get a little slightly tweaked, and it sounds worse than it really is. But kudos to the Bears, man. I mean, they vetted this prospect, they vetted his family. I mean, they looked into it as deeply as possible, and like we said in the pre-show, they made the decision to it was Caleb was their guy. And then once they were comfortable, they didn't even bother with anyone else. That's how comfortable and how locked in they were after checking into his background. There was no selfish issues. He is a team first guy. He has been building up to this moment since he was like in middle school. This is what he's expected of himself. It's a new era, man. The NIL has kind of changed things. He's stepping into the league as already a multimillionaire, which is just, something you can't think. Guys our age, especially in my age, that's so weird to think about that he's stepping in already with that level of fame. But that's society, that's social media, that's what the norm is now going forward.
So Jacob, I'm curious, as you as a scout are judging game film, and you have an opportunity, given how you've built up your following and how you've built up your brand. You get to interview some of these prospects. You didn't get to interview Caleb Williams, I don't think, but you have most of your eval is based on tape. And you don't get to necessarily talk to all the prospects. You're not going to like the weight room and doing kind of that investigatory kind of background stuff that those full-time scouts are doing. And you're also not privy to medical information. So there may be a guy that you really like, but you didn't see the medical report that said, hey, this guy's knee is not going to hold up, right? So where I'm going with this is, I appreciate that you can cut through some of this other noise because you're going to watch the tape. And so you watched every single collegiate throw that Caleb Williams made, going all the way back to Oklahoma. What did you see on the tape that convinces you that this is a no doubt number 1 overall quarterback?
So I think I can go in a lot of different directions with that answer. And I think, even starting out right out of the gate at Oklahoma, it was pretty clear that he had immense potential. You're looking at the arm talent, first and foremost, the velocity behind his throws, the distance he gets behind his throws, the elasticity in his arm, the ability to throw from different angles, to throw on the move, to deliver dimes off platform. The vision, I think, is another thing too. His decision-making, throwing the football, his ability to read the field, his ability to anticipate his wide receivers open, and that creativity that outside of structure, he has the chance to roll out and he can find the open man while extending the play with his feet. When he runs with the ball, he has got very good ball carrier vision. He's one of the better athletes at quarterback, not just in this class, but I feel like he's going to be a pretty good running quarterback in the NFL right out of the gate. And I think a big selling point, I guess, a big comparison for, Caleb Williams and Justin Fields is, Caleb isn't as big and he's not as athletic. But Caleb Williams isn't diminutive, however you pronounce that. I don't know. He's not small and he's not unathletic. He's a very good athlete and he's got a pretty solid build. And I think that ultimately, when you're looking at the quarterback abilities, how you are as a thrower, I think that there's so much to like about Caleb. Obviously, the stuff I mentioned before, the accuracy, the touch down the field, the ability to develop chemistry quickly with his receivers, anticipate their movements in and out of structure, that placement to know, all right, I'm going to put the ball where only this guy can get it. You're throwing differently to Taj Washington than you are to Brendan Rice, and that showed on tape. And I think that that's going to show with how he throws to Odunze compared to DJ Moore or Keenan Allen. So all those things, I think the arm talent, the accuracy, the athleticism, the creativity. It's the beeping again. Welcome back to that. That and the fact that he's proven and he's shown that he gives a damn, and I think that, I don't know, obviously, like you said, I haven't spoken to Caleb Williams, but I trust the people who have worked with him. I trust the people who have coached him much more than I trust people who, I heard from so-and-so who heard from so-and-so that Caleb isn't a good leader. I heard from so-and-so who, and I hate to stereotype, but generally some of the people making those claims fit a specific demographic. And I think that for one reason or another, they don't understand Caleb, which, you could claim whatever. Maybe that's just me spitballing, but it's irrefutable that there seems to be a certain group of people who view Caleb in a negative light from a character perspective, when anybody who's ever been around him, anybody who's ever coached him, anybody who's ever played with him, anybody who's ever played against him, they know the competitor that he is. They know the leader he is. They know the person he is. And I think that any concerns about character were invalid to begin with. You're threatened because he's a young, confident man who isn't afraid to paint his nails, who isn't afraid to show emotion. He's not this stoic, put your head down and, oh yes, I'll do whatever you tell me. I'm just happy to be here. He's not that guy. He views himself as a superstar, and he is a superstar. I think that's something that a lot of people can't wrap their heads around. So not only the fact that he's an incredible football player, but who he is as a person, who he is as a leader and as a competitor. I'm very certain that not only is he the best quarterback in this class by a country mile, but he's also a very high caliber prospect by historical standards. So that's my long-winded answer of saying basically everything. I don't want to say he's a perfect prospect because, he has his flaws, obviously, but there's so much to like with him. I can't even comprehend being like, oh, yeah, let's take Jaden Daniels, who has a much weaker arm, who didn't break out until year 5, somebody who scrambles under pressure at a historic rate and doesn't get the ball out well enough, something like that. Or, I could go on and on, but this is the slam dunk pick. This was never in question, in my opinion.
Well, and I think you bring up some interesting points, and that generational divide, I think, is something Lester and I kind of touched on our last episode, and I think that there's some interesting pieces there. And I just, from my perspective, I was at the draft, and I drove 9 hours to be in Detroit so that I could be in a room with Caleb Williams and potentially somebody else that was there at the draft, so that I could just see how they interact with media. Like I wanted to be there and be present. And it was 3 long days, including draft day. And I'll put out a story about that at some point here. But here's what stuck out to me. And after they're drafted and they walk out on the stage and they hug Goodell and they dap him up, and then they do whatever else, and then they start to go into doing some stand-up interviews, and they do some Zoom interviews with local media, and maybe they talk to their hometown paper or their college town paper. Like, they do a lot. I mean, this is a very long night. It's very stressful. And then they come into this media scrum, and there's a lot of people. And, it can be probably pretty stressful. I'm sure some of these guys are tired. So when I say this, I'm not trying to say that any of these guys are going to be good or bad based on how they acted. However, it was very noticeable how some of these guys acted. So Jaden Daniels was the first guy that came in the room. Even though he was drafted second, he got done with his interviews before Caleb. Also, Caleb was kind of hanging back because he wanted to see what the Bears would do at 9, right? So he wanted to see if they draft somebody there, and he was kind of reacting to that pick as well. So I think that's what took him a little longer to get in the room. Jaden Daniels walks in the room. He's got sunglasses on. He's kind of quiet. He's kind of clipped in his answers. He looks nervous, right? He's kind of hiding behind sunglasses. And that repeated. There were other prospects that kind of did the same thing. Malik Neighbors, kind of very short, clipped answers, hiding behind sunglasses. Again, these guys could be good football players. How you handle a press conference has nothing to do with how you play the game of football. I'm not saying that. But it was very different when Caleb Williams walked in the room. No sunglasses. Sits down, hey, how y'all doing? And someone, 5 people are asking him a question. He zeroes in on one, and he gives an incredibly thoughtful answer. And it was revealing. He understood the question. He gave some actual thought to it, responded. Next one, same thing. Next one, same thing. I would say there were 4 prospects that I saw that I was impressed with. Caleb Williams being the first. Then there was J.C. Latham, who I thought was pretty cool customer. I liked J.C. Latham after I heard his presser. Latu, also, like, you can't not like that guy. Like, he was incredible, and I was like, oh, I'm a fan of his. This is a guy that I'm going to follow. I'm going to like. The 4th guy is the next guy that we're going to talk about. And that's Odunze, an incredibly impressive young man. I found myself smiling, which I know I'm supposed to be this impartial person. I'm not supposed to, but I'm trying to live tweet his answers, and I'm just have this smile on my face because I'm like, this guy's incredible. This is an incredible prospect. I love him on tape. This was the guy I wanted. I kept telling everybody my heart wanted Rome. This is where I really wanted the Chicago Bears to go. I love his tape. I love what he adds. I love the idea of grabbing a blue chip wide receiver, but the person he is was so incredible. And that really shined through in the interview process as well. And so, again, I want to start with Lester. I listened to your guys' post pick recap here, and you guys were very excited about this pick. You've had a couple days to think about it. And what do you think this pick says about Ryan Poles? And what do you think this pick says about what this offense is going to look like in 2024?
It was interesting because, when the draft was over, Ryan Poles was pretty transparent how this is what their plan was. The fact that came out, that this is what they wanted all along, I thought that was pretty transparent to him. I mean, Ryan Poles, to his credit, throughout his 3 drafts, he's been pretty open with the media, something we didn't get a lot with Ryan Pace or guys before him. But Poles seems like he has a plan. I mean, he has a vision. The fact that this worked out the right way, he even talked about how assistant GM Ian Cunningham had to kind of stop him because he was close to trading up because he wanted Rome. He wanted to get this, like you said, this blue chip receiver to pair with his blue chip quarterback. That's just an incredible opportunity for a franchise to get these 2 guys at the same draft, let them grow together. And the cool thing is Rome's not going to be expected to be the man day one because you got DJ Moore, Keenan Allen in the house already. You can bring him along, let him learn the pro game, let him learn the positions because, in the NFL game, it's rare that one guy is just this, so he'll be moved around the offense quite a bit. He'll have a chance to learn other positions. He'll learn the slot. He'll learn the X. He is going to be able to grow with Caleb Williams. And like you said, the off-field stuff, the character stuff, a team captain, does a lot of stuff with charity work. You could just tell when you hear him talk that this guy made Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus fall in love with him because he is that guy. He is the intangible guy as well. So me and Jacob jumped on, and we're both so excited at that pick. We couldn't believe it happened. Thank you to the Falcons and Ryan Pace, doing the Bears a solid there by going with the quarterback. But I never thought it would happen. I figured someone would jump the Bears to get Odunze.
There's been talk in the past, and I don't know if Poles talks like this, but there's this idea of like, oh, you put a Bear sticker next to, a few players every draft where it's like they really embody everything that they want as a Chicago Bear. And I don't know if Poles still employs or if Poles employs that type of system, but To me, Odunze seems like this is everything that Ryan Poles preaches. And so, this is why I really thought this is my guy. This is the guy that I really want. Again, nothing against Malik Neighbors. I just, those are two very different personalities. I'm sure Malik Neighbors will be a fine football player. But if the Bears were in a situation and both were on the clock, they were on the clock and both were on the board, I would want Rome Odunze. I would have him a little higher. Some of that is the intangibles. Some of it is like, I just like his football game. I think he's just, he plays receiver in the way that I like. And so Jacob, from the film aspect, from the fact that on reception perception, he has the all green chart. I've never seen that before. Every route tree he runs at a high level. Every route on the route tree he runs at a high level. But when you watch his tape, what is he bringing to this team? What do you think his impact is as a rookie, and how do you see this moving forward?
So I think that obviously there's a lot to like in Odunze, and I'm with you there. I know that's not necessarily the popular opinion, but I had Odunze over Neighbors. If both of them were available on the board at the same time, I would have taken Odunze. And I say that I didn't get the chance to hear Odunze speak or, talk to him firsthand, like you had the chance to in Detroit, which I'm a little jealous. I can't lie. But I do think that you watch Odunze, the size shows up, the physicality shows up, the ball skills, the body control, the speed, the route running IQ. There's so much to like with him. And I think that when you compare him to Neighbors, I think Neighbors has the higher ceiling because he's faster, he's more explosive, he's more agile. But in terms of, all right, gun to your head, who's going to be the better pro? I'd feel safer saying Odunze. And the reason I say that is, one, because of the size and the physicality, I think is superior with Odunze. At the same time, I also think he's a smarter route runner than Neighbors at this stage. And Neighbors might have the ability to sink his hips and make super dynamic cuts, but I think that Odunze does a better job of getting NFL open on a more consistent basis. And the part of that, I've said before, over the last couple of days where, in the NFL, you don't have as wide of hash marks. You don't have as much of the field to work with. And I feel like the college game kind of favors those super speedy receivers because they can rely on pure athleticism. They don't have to worry as much about becoming physical, using your hands to create subtle separation at the top of your route, stuff like that. I think that's something Odunze does very well. And in those tighter contested quarters that he has to work with, I think he's going to thrive because he knows how to attack, to sense the soft spots in zone coverage that he's facing. He knows how to disguise his route concepts through his stems, how to attack leverage points when he's, getting towards the top of his route and setting himself up to get the DB in one direction and get himself in the other. And that on top of how coordinated he is, how smooth of a mover he is. He glides on tape. And that's something where even if he's not a 4.2 guy, he still ran a low 4.4. And that's why I never understood the deep speed concerns, because he was a star athlete in track coming out of high school. Just because he's bigger and he's not as small as some of these guys, he might look a little bit slower, but he's still just as fast as them. He's just longer strided. So I think there's really a lot to like with Odunze. I had him as my number 4 overall prospect in the class. And, I think you're right, where you have the ability to play the X, the ability to play the slot. You can stick him outside of the field as a Z. Wherever you want to put him, I think he'll thrive, although I do expect him to be mostly on the boundary, because if you have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, both guys who can win consistently out of the slot, I think it only makes sense to get your big-bodied receiver, put him on the X. But I think Odunze is a guy who's going to contribute right away. I think that obviously you have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Cole Kmet competing for touches in the passing game. But I think Odunze in the long run, I think he can step in pretty quickly as a wide receiver 2. I think he can step in eventually as a wide receiver 1 for Chicago. So I don't know exactly what the future is going to hold for that receiver position, just because there's so much talent there now. But I'm excited to see what happens there. And I think that's a good problem that the Bears haven't had in such a long time. So I definitely, this was the pick I would have made at 9, especially knowing he was available. I wouldn't have been mad if they moved up to 7 or something like that in order to trade up for him, but they stayed put. They kept their draft capital. So I'm a happy camper. That's for sure.
Oh, Lesser, you're muted.
I'm just saying it's a funny sentence, saying that the Bears have so many talented receivers because, that's just not something that we're used to in Chicago. That's just, we had some talk about the Trestman year when they had 2 really good receivers. The Bears have 3, plus a couple of good tight ends, plus a bunch of talent out of the backfield. So this offense is going to be pretty fun to watch.
And I want to say that I thought it was hilarious where Odunze was doing a press conference and someone told him, Johnny Morris being the all-time Bears leading receiver at 5,000 yards. And he heard that and he's like, in the career? Like, he was amazed, like how low the bar is for these Bears wide receivers and quarterbacks to actually, be record holders in today's, in the franchise. It's unbelievable how low the bar is. So I'm hoping that, whether it's Odunze, whether it's more, probably not Keenan Allen, just because, he's over 30, but if one of those guys are able to break the all-time receiving record, if not both end up surpassing it, I'd be very happy. And honestly, I wouldn't rule it out either.
Well, I mean, you're not ruling both out. Yeah. I mean, I would sure hope that Rome Odunze is going to break all of the receiving records. That's got to be the expectation. And yeah, he's got a 1 year. DJ Moore has a 1 year head start, so that makes a lot of sense if they're able to extend him and he's able to have a healthy career. I could see DJ Moore certainly breaking that 5,000 yard barrier. I think if you just talk about pure talented wide receivers and you start listing them throughout the history of the Bears, and everybody knows that follows me and has been listening to me knows how much I love Harlan Hill, and his amazing start to his career is basically putting up Randy Moss numbers. But after Harlan Hill, there's some drought. There's some tough years, right? And then you kind of get into Brandon Marshall. I know I loved Alshon Jeffrey, but now you have DJ Moore. Keenan Allen is, way more accomplished and talented than anybody else that the Bears have ever had on their roster in terms of receiving talent. And now you have an incredible prospect. But I wanted to say, like, the person that said, hey, the career mark is 5,000, Johnny Morris, and his reaction was so, oh my God, what? Like, that, is that possible? But then he sort of followed up and was like, hey man, like, that's an incredible accomplishment. Like, he kind of caught himself back and did the right thing. Like, he wasn't going to make fun of a career accomplishment, of Johnny Morris. He doesn't know the history of the Bears, right? Like, even though Bonus grew up loving Devin Hester, right? Yeah. So, and I will tell you that my reaction in the moment, so again, I'm in the press room and I have to be professional, whatever. Fortunately, when the pick came in, Jaden Daniels was at the podium. So I gave a fist pump, and I have no idea what Jaden Daniels said at that moment. I just stopped listening because I was pumping my fist and I was pretty excited. And then I was showing the person next to me because she was like, what? But that was fun. And then a little other moment was right before Daniels came in was when the Penix pick came in, which that meant to me okay, Odunze's on the board. Let's go get him. And right when Penix was picked, this guy behind me, who's clearly a Falcons reporter and a Georgia guy, yelled, hell yeah, 4 times. And everybody's staring at him are you insane? That is an insane moment for your team. And he just started defending it like it was the greatest pick in the world. Bizarre. Anyway, that's those are draft day stories. And Jacob, absolutely, I told you I would buy you a dinner and you did not show up. So that offer doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I'm a little peeved that I wasn't able to find a way to make it up to Detroit. But next year it's in Green Bay, and my brother goes to college up at St. Norbert in De Pere, Wisconsin. So I've got a place to stay, and we'll see. I'll have a little more PTO at the full-time job, so might be able to make it up there.
Well, Jacob, my friend, we will give you the credential because I believe my tweet yesterday makes me not eligible to go to Green Bay for the draft.
Public enemy number one in Packerland. Be careful with JB
Yeah,
up there.
well, the Panthers fan base has moved on. They no longer care about me, so now I got to go back and make another fan base upset. So
Nice.
we'll move on here. We're going to move on to the remember the second round draft pick is Montez Sweat. So impact edge rusher the Bears did add with the draft capital that was originally slated for the second round this year. We'll move to the third round. Kiran Amegadjie, very excited for this developmental prospect. Really long arms. And so I want to talk a little bit about offensive line theory just to start, because a little bit of what I've heard is, hey, he played guard at Yale as a freshman or, as a youngster. Okay. I'm not going to, talk about the Ivies. I don't know anything about Ivy League football, but, probably trying to get your best five on the field. And I'm sure he could survive in that environment. Those are really long arms for a guard. So that's just I'm just kind of putting that out there. There are some metrics that you do see. And part of why they want long arms for a tackle is so that you could reach that rush in. That's an important piece of it. It's also that kind of worries me, longer armed guards. You just don't see that often because of the leverage point. So as a line talk, Lester, where do you see this guy fitting in terms of body size and body type? And how do you envision him on this roster?
Yeah, I mean, the body type, you right away think, yeah, he's definitely going to be a tackle. We've heard this regime talk about wanting a certain threshold for their arm length at tackles. Darnell Wrights came in like a quarter inch, a lower. Braxton Jones, of course, is long arms. This guy has really long arms. And you talk about having those guys kick in the guard. One of the reasons is things happen a little quicker at guard. The tackle's on you a lot faster from a defense, so you have to have quicker hands. And usually, if you have longer limbs, there's just like a fraction of a second where you're not able to get your hands up quick enough for that. Not always, not with everyone. Some guys can do it, but that's generally the consensus of why you don't want to have really long arms on the inside. But whereas if you're out at tackle, you have a little more time. There's some more distance between you and the end, so that kind of works better there. But I like him, the player. I didn't know a lot about him. As soon as the pick happened, I went to Twitter. Of course, I went to Jacob. Me and Jacob had our show right after the pick was made. I learned a ton about him from Jacob on the podcast. Went back into it, looked more on YouTube, and yeah, this guy is he's good. He's a good athlete. I'm sure we'll get more into with Jacob here, but I like what I saw initially from Kiran. And I got to say kudos to you for sending me the name pronunciation, because for now it's just Kiran. I'm not going to try and I don't have it up here, but kudos to you for sending it to me. So I was ready to go on the podcast when I had to record that, because I had his name right there to say it perfectly.
Yeah, I had to tag you to make sure that you saw that going into that podcast. I figured I'd find it right away and make sure that you saw that. But so Jacob, you knew how to pronounce his name because you had actually scouted this guy. You watched the Ivy League tape. Again, this guy's from Yale. Again, local kid though, local guy. So I think that he's fired up. Had a lot of cleanup of his Twitter account because he had some frustrated Bear fan moments on his Twitter account, which is hilarious and fun to see. So he was kind of cleaning some of that up so that he wasn't making any of his new teammates upset. But on the tape, Jacob, when you watch this guy, what are the traits that stand out to you as something that you say, yes, this is worth investing in as a developmental piece?
Yeah, so I think part of it with Amegadjie is just how high of a ceiling I think he has. So he's someone I projected as a late second round pick, and that's even including the season ending injury, which prevented him from playing at the Senior Bowl and playing at the Combine. Even still being down at the Combine, having the chance to measure the second longest arms out of any offensive tackle in this year's class. He's somebody who moves incredibly well. I think laterally he's got really good redirectability and pass protection, good explosiveness coming into his pass sets, climbing to the second level or moving as a down blocker or a reach blocker, whatever, either or, you have impressive acceleration. And I think that the speed, the body control, the agility, they all stand out, especially for a guy who's as big as he is. And I think being a natural mover like that, as edge rushers are getting more and more athletic, you're seeing guys like Dallas Turner and Chop Robinson running the 4.4s. you need those offensive tackles with long arms and, and quick feet who can beat them to the edge. And I think Amegadjie is one of those guys who can do that. That and the power he displayed, granted at the FCS level, but he showed a strong anchor, the ability to lock out guys from his frame with that combination long upper body. And then just the nastiness, the ability to finish blocks and to drive guys into the dirt. I mean, that's something that you either have or you don't. And Amegadjie's a block finisher, that's for sure. So I think that, I project him as a tackle. I think it's a little bit different from a Braxton Jones because I think Amegadjie's a bit more densely built to the point where I could see him sticking at guard if that's where the Bears project him. I think that his best playing opportunity is going to be at guard to start for the time being, but I think this is a great landing spot for him just because he's a little bit raw in terms of his technique, in terms of the pad level, in terms of the spatial awareness, and then obviously the jump from the FCS to the NFL, can be a big one for some people. So I think this is going to give him a little bit of lesser expectations right out of the gate where he's not expected to start. And if he has a bad year as a rookie, people aren't going to panic. They're not going to say, oh, this was a bust. We took him early in the second round and he didn't perform super well. He wasn't really consistent. This is a terrible pick. I think as a third rounder who isn't coming in expected to start right away, he gets a little bit more leeway and a little bit more opportunity to grow. So I think this is a good spot for him. I think this is great value for the Bears. Whether it's at tackle or guard, I think that he has the tools to be a high-end starter in the league. Whether or not he gets there, we'll see. But I certainly think that physically he's got the opportunity to. And having the chance to interview him back in October, he was my first interview that I had in this, my draft interview, prospect interview series. I came away impressed with who he was as a person, the mindset that he has as a football player. So I do believe that he will turn into a solid starter in the league. I honestly think it's just a matter of when, because I don't think it's going to be in year one, but down the line, I could definitely see it happening.
Well, you mentioned growing, and I think that that's something that Lester and I talk about a lot. I've talked about it with you, and I've talked about it with EJ and others. That first year is really important to learn how to be a professional, but also how to eat like a professional, how to lift like a professional, how to work out like a professional, right? And for someone that's coming from the Ivy League program, and again, I'm sure it's a great program, but it's not Alabama, right? It's not an SEC program where they're probably pretty close to treating their college players to how they're going to be treated in the NFL in terms of that strength and nutrition program. This is someone who's probably had to kind of go a little bit on his own and above and beyond to try to get to that point. Now he's going to have a nutritionist that's going to tailor make his nutrition routine. He's going to have a strength and conditioning coach that's going to have something that's tailor made for him. And so if the Bears see him as a tackle, which I believe that's how Poles has been talking about him, they're going to try to shape his body in a way that reflects what a professional tackle needs. So I don't necessarily see him getting on the field much at all in 2024 because I think that they see him as, we're going to try to get you up to speed, but unless something happens, we would like it for you to kind of have a redshirt year and kind of get that first year under your belt. And then in 2025, I could see him then challenging someone like Braxton Jones for playing time. Braxton Jones is a solid start. We've all kind of talked about Braxton Jones being a solid left tackle, but is Braxton Jones the type of guy that you want to extend with, big left tackle money? Maybe he will be. Maybe he'll take that next step. Maybe this draft will push him a little bit more. Maybe he'll take that next step. Or maybe it's like, hey, we drafted the replacement. We feel good about Amegadjie to take over that role in 25 or 26, right? So I think it's a really smart draft pick from that. It's an incredibly valuable position, and you had time to develop. Braxton Jones allows you to do something like this, and it gives you an option to potentially replace him. So I really like the pick. And again, another higher character guy that, it kind of falls into that polls. Lester and I have talked about this many times. Was he a team captain? Oh, he might be an interest for Ryan Poles because that seems to be someone like he wants leaders. He wants team captains. So let's move on to maybe the best pick of all time. I'm just not. I mean, I don't want to exaggerate. I don't want to use hyperbole, but fourth rounder on the punter from Iowa, is amazing. It's beautiful. I feel like I manifested this. I talked about it for months. Jacob, I know you're a big fan of Tory Taylor. I'm going to start with you. Defend this selection in this round for Ryan Poles.
So I think a lot of people got wrapped up in it needs to be a defensive lineman or it needs to be an edge rusher. And the Bears ended up getting an edge rusher, and he's a guy we'll get to later. But I think that with Taylor, you have a rare prospect at a position where, I mean, you have a lot of guys who are all right, but if you can have a difference maker, that's a very valuable asset to your team. And I think that's true in college. I think that's true in the NFL. Iowa saw firsthand Tory Taylor was the best player on their offense last year. And I think that you see a big bodied punter. He's someone who, 6'4", he's 230, 240, something like that. Naturally, the bigger punters, they're going to have more raw power to work with. And I think that's apparent in how the ball comes off of his boot. He's able to flip the field consistently. He's able to, kick through harsh weather, through cold weather, through wind, what have you. He's a very good directional punter. He's someone with, I'd say Matt Ariza had the best leg strength I've ever seen. I think Tory Taylor is the most accurate punter I've ever scouted at the collegiate football level. And when you factor in the fact that he also has one of the best legs I've ever seen since I started scouting, I think that just makes him a no-brainer of, all right, this guy has the potential to be a star. And in today's NFL too, you have the new kickoff rules. I think that if you have someone with the leg strength to be able to either have that hang time beneath his kicks or the distance to get it into the end zone, returning the kick return, I guess, is with the new rule that they have from the XFL, UFL, whatever you want to call it now, it's going to promote kick returning. And if you have someone who can get that hang time, you have someone who can get the distance to even avoid it altogether and get it into the end zone, I think that's a very valuable thing to have. And I tweeted out after the pick because I was very happy with it just because Tory Taylor was incredible at the collegiate level. I defended it as a lot of people are mad it's not defensive line. And, sure, I liked Austin Booker. We'll get to him again. I think that, whatever. I don't want to spoil anything and repeat myself later. But I think that there's more value in a potentially elite punter than, realistically, in most cases, you're going with a defensive lineman round 4, round 5. You're going to be you're going to be happy if that's a rotational defender. So I guess it kind of weighs, would you rather have a solid rotational defender or an elite punter? I think there are a bunch of solid rotational backup defensive linemen in the NFL. There aren't a ton of rare, very, very good punters. And I think that Tory Taylor has the opportunity to be just that. So also, when you consider in the fact that Trenton Gill didn't really develop much in year 2, I've maintained that he's someone who he had some all right punts. He had a handful that were good, but so many of them were just meh. Like, how is this helping? How are you separating yourself from the other punters in the league? And when your ratio of punts that go into touchbacks to punts that end up being down in the 20-yard line, when that's one of the lowest in the league, I mean, that's when it starts to become an issue. And, one of the lowest yards per punt averages in the league. I know he was bottom 10 in that. And then it became clear that, all right, this is someone you can improve off of. I wasn't expecting the Bears to make this pick, but I'm happy they did, because I think that Tory Taylor has the opportunity to be the best punter in the Bears have had since Brad Maynard. And they've had.
I heard you on this recap, and I think that this is. I cannot believe that you said the ceiling is Brad Maynard, because Brad Maynard was a fine punter, and I don't want Sam Householder to at me and can come at me because he went to the same college as Brad Maynard. Brad Maynard was fine for a good number of years, but he never made a Pro Bowl. He wasn't like this, like super well thought of guy that like being in the top of the league. This is the revolution of punting, right? Like we are in a new era of punting. There are some guys that are breaking old school. Sammy Baugh record that stood forever of average yards per punt got broken recently, right? So it got broken by 2 guys. So there are some big leg punters that are coming in, and they are booming the ball. And then there are more guys that are more accurate. Like this is honestly a punting revolution. And that's part of the thing with Gill, is that Gill, he didn't have a great year last year, but Gill kind of matches up with some historical punting stats. Like if he was around 30 years ago, you'd be like, yeah, Trent Gill, he's fine. He's a fine punter, right? We have seen an advancement in punting over the last few years. I mean, I think it's recent with some of these Australian guys and some of these other guys that are coming into the league, and they're kind of taking it by storm. And so honestly, I heard that and I was like, I disagree. I don't think this guy has a ceiling. I don't think he has a comp that we can look to in Bears history, because we are seeing a punting revolution, and this punting revolution, we now have one of those guys. Like that's I think the kind of the message is that Bears fans can say, hey, yeah, we've got one of these 5 or 6 guys that are kind of changing the face of punting. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and so I will say to that point, I'll clarify that I think that Tory Taylor can be the best punter since Brad Maynard. I think that the ceiling is higher though with Tory Taylor than it was with Maynard. I should have, I don't know if I clarified that well enough, but I do think that when you look at the leg power that he has, the downfield touch, he's a difference maker. And Brad Maynard, was a very good punter. But at the same time, I think that Tory Taylor, I liken him to, somewhat of a Michael Dixon with the Seahawks right now, where,
yes,
big bodied kicker, comes from that, that Aussie background where, he can kick in that rugby style with a run up approach, but he also has the raw leg strength, the ability to get it out in a pro style and still develop some really good kicks. I think that's the closest comparison I can have. And I say this as someone who I think that's the first special teams player comparison I've ever made in my entire life. But I do think that there's, quite a high upside. And I stick by the fact that I think if Tory Taylor can be even a 2-time Pro Bowler, this pick is absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
If he's consistently one of the top 10 punters in the league, that's worth taking in round 4, in my opinion, because you've seen worse prospects go in round 4. Like just last year, Jordan Stout and Jake Camarda, 2 fine punters. They both went round 4. I think Tory Taylor is miles ahead of both of those guys coming out of college. You've seen, I know Mitch Wishnowsky at Utah, coming out. He was a 4th round pick for the 49ers. Fine prospect. I think Tory Taylor blew him out of the water as well. So, I mean, I think it just comes down to he has the potential to be something special. Take it, like I feel like there's so much, paralysis by overanalysis going on with some of these, analysis of Tory Taylor.
I think the cool thing about Taylor is with a guy like Brad Maynard, he was known for his directional punting. He was very good at that. He knew how to punt the ball to where his gunners can get there and make a play on it. That's something that Bears haven't really seen in a long time. With Taylor, though, he has that. But he also has the booming leg where if you need a 70-yard punt, he can rip that off for you too. He can kick the ball out of the end zone if you have to. So I was excited by this pick because JB has been an Iowa fan. He's been talking up this guy the entire season. So the fact that the Bears got a chance to draft, I think was kind of cool. Then, of course, Iowa, man, they sucked all last year on offense. And they were like, a 10-win team? And you look at it, it's all defense and it's all field position and it's all Tory Taylor. He had a highlight package that the school put out for him for the punter. That's just ridiculous to have that happen. So, yeah, this pick was a head scratcher at the time, but it's really cool. The fact that they may have a guy that's going to be able to kind of flip the field position. They can play that game if they have to. And I think it was also cool that Caleb Williams right away sent him a text. You're not going to be punting very often. I mean, I think that was kind of cool that Caleb kind of, he took that step to let him know.
Yeah. And, I did not coin this, but I'm happy to try to popularize it unless and until I can come up with a better one. But the crocodile punter, that's an incredible nickname. So we'll roll with that. Whoever coined that, we'll roll with it. I wanted to see if anybody else had that nickname because that felt so right that there had to be another Aussie punter that maybe I got nothing. I got nothing on my search that's out there. There's one image from some random like card set of some person dressed up like the crocodile hunter and punting a crocodile, which is kind of amazing. But I didn't really know the game, and I didn't necessarily want to share it yet because I don't know what I'm sharing, and that sometimes gets me into some trouble. So if I don't understand the reference of what I'm pulling, but anyway, the crocodile punter, we like that. Yeah, Dixon was the guy that I was going to compare him to as being the most similar to, and how Seahawks fans love him, right? And I don't know what number Taylor's going to be. So, and we got to wait. You got to wait through camp because maybe he's got an eye on a number that's currently occupied or something like that. But the Bears need to put out a Tory Taylor jersey because the number of Iowa fans that are Bears fans is huge number, and they loved this guy. They will sell a ton of Tory Taylor jerseys. So it's a fun pick. It's a great pick, and I know I coined the guillotine. I get it, but he did not develop. This is a guy Tory Taylor is a guy that really is in that punting revolution, and I think he could be among, if not the best of all of them. And that's what's exciting to me, is because he can do all of those different things. He's not just one thing. He's not just a big leg. He's not just a directional punter or an accurate punter. He has all of that piece to his game. And so I think he's going to be a guy that honestly Bears fans are going to love, and they're going to cheer for this guy. That Bears fans love their special teamers.
We love them.
This is not an overdraft. This is not something that I think we have to defend that much, because I think that he's going to have a lot of value, and I think Bears fans are just going to love this guy instantly.
Yeah.
So,
and the Australians too. You're going to get a lot of jersey sales out in Australia too. So that on top of the Iowa guys, I think it's a no-brainer. I might even buy a Tory Taylor jersey.
Nice.
I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't bought a jersey for a while because I kept getting burned, and there was some kind of rough years. And I don't know. Maybe I'll just be like a historical guy, like you've already, And then they took Rome Odunze, and I'm like, man, I like this kid. But then the Taylor thing, we'll see. So let's move on to the last draft pick. So we thought maybe the draft would be over. But we all kind of watching because maybe Ryan Pohl's going to use some of that 2025 capital to try to sneak back into this draft. He does so. He trades the 2025 fourth rounder to get back in the fifth round to take Austin Booker, defensive lineman, a guy that a lot of people wanted him to use that fourth round pick on. And the interesting thing that you guys covered in your recap was that this pick ended up being the pick that was originally theirs, that they ended up trading for Ryan Bates. And so now you kind of have this situation where the Bears gave up their 2025 fourth rounder for two players, Ryan Bates, who's likely to start at center, and this draft pick, Austin Booker. Jacob, start with you. Tell us about Austin Booker. What do we need to know? What are the expectations for 2024?
So I'm coming into this a little bit lower on Austin Booker than maybe the consensus. I know a lot of people had him as, say a third round pick. They had him top 100. That seemed to be the consensus. I was a little bit lower. I had him as a fourth round pick. I think that, he's a little bit raw. I would have honestly preferred if he, for his development's sake, if he went back to school for another year, because I think if he had two strong seasons of production, he could have been a top 50 pick in 2025. But to have him in round 5 still available, I think that was absurd to me. I think someone with that upside, someone with those tools and that untapped potential, makes a lot of sense to be a late day 2, early day 3 pick. So when I'm looking at Booker, I see someone with the length. I see someone with the quickness, the flexibility, turning the corner. I think those are the big 3 with him, and as well as the power. And for someone who's 240 pounds, I think he converts speed to power well. And I think a lot of that is how well he churns his legs through contact and the point of attack. And also I think for someone who only has 1 year of any significant tape, because, he's a redshirt sophomore, he had his redshirt year, and then redshirt freshman, he, didn't play a lot on defense. And then he had transferred to Kansas after, 2 years at Minnesota, and he tore it up. So he's someone with a pretty wide variety of moves he can use to win. the push-pull, the cross-chops, swims, rips, things of that nature, long arms. There's, a lot of different ways that he can generate that, backfield penetration. So I feel good about him as a developmental prospect. Maybe part of why he fell into the 5th round is he didn't test maybe as well as some people were expecting. Still above the 70th percentile for edge rushers historically, so still very good. But, maybe some people were expecting, oh, he's raw. We'd like to see him in that, that 8.0 or above RAS role where, he's got elite testing. But overall, he was very well-rounded, and I think on tape he shows that quickness a bit more than he did in a testing situation. So I don't expect him to contribute a ton right out of the gate because I think processing is a big issue for him. There are some times where he doesn't necessarily know, especially as a pass rusher, what moves to use and in what order to use them. I think as a run defender, he's got the opportunity to hold up blocks a little bit, wait, and then figure out what move to use in order to disengage and make the tackle. So he's got a little bit more time to think and react in the run game. And while his skill set may scream pass rusher, rotational pass rusher, I do think that he can contribute a decent amount as a run defender right out of the gate as well. So is he a starter right out of the gate? I don't think so, but I think he's someone you can ease in as a rotational edge rusher, especially when you don't have a bona fide edge 2 who's like a good starter right now. I think Booker will get plenty of opportunities to play, and then as the season goes on, he'll be progressively included more in the defense and the game plan, and then I think by 2025 he's got a chance to be a starter. The comparison that I used for him was Arden Key. I use that in my what should I say? I use that in my draft guide on my Patreon. And, some people say, oh, Arden Key, he was like, everyone thought he was going to be a top 10 pick and then he had a bad last year at LSU and then kind of fell down the board. But I see someone who the last 3 years, he had 6.5 sacks in 2021, 4.5 sacks in 2022, and 6 sacks in 2023. He's someone that, okay, yeah, maybe he's a rotational guy, but he can get to the passer at a pretty high value, at a pretty high level. So if you can get like a consistent 6 sacks out of Austin Booker, I think that's a great pick in round 5. So I'm a fan of the pick for sure. I look at it as you traded a future 4th. That's probably going to be a mid to late 4th round pick for both Austin Booker and Ryan Bates. I think that's the way that I look at it because that 5th round pick was that the Bears traded up to ended up being the one that they gave to Buffalo for Ryan Bates. And when you look at it like that, I think it becomes a lot more palatable. So all in all, I mean, I'm a fan of how things turned out with the Bears getting Austin Booker, moving up for him. And I don't think the year 1 role is going to be massive. I do think he'll play as some sort of a rotation, but I think this is much more of a future pick given how young and how, he's still a work in progress, but the upside's definitely there.
Lester, I heard you talk about all of the different moves that he has in his arsenal already. And we talk a lot about young players. They may come in, they may have a speed rush or they may have their bull rush develop, but they don't have the counter move off of it. And that's something that a young player needs to develop. This guy sounds like he kind of throws a lot of different pitches right now, right? Like he has a lot of different pitches that he's working on, that he's willing to learn, showed him out in the 1 year of tape that he had at Kansas. We've seen defensive linemen under this new coaching regime develop over the course of their rookie year. We saw it in Dexter last year. Pickens maybe not quite as much as we might have liked, but certainly Dexter showed a lot of progress throughout that first year. Like, what would you as a defensive line coach want to see a guy like Booker come in and sort of work on to try to develop and make somewhat of an impact in his rookie season?
Yeah, I think Jacob nailed it when he talked about his processing. He has a wide variety of moves when you watch him play on film. He's not just a speed guy, but I mean, he has that, and that helps him a lot in college. But he has a dip inside. He has a swim move. He's able to come back underneath. He has they called it a Euro step move in one of the scouting reports I read. So he has other things he can go to, but knowing when to pull them out, knowing when to put the counter on someone, that's something he has to learn, because you still see him sometimes getting stuck on blocks, which happens sometimes with younger players. Is they kind of go to their first move, they kind of get stuck, and they're not sure when to kind of engage that second move. So I think he's a guy that's like you guys said, he's young, a redshirt sophomore. He's coming into the league where if he would have stayed in college, he's probably a top 50 pick next year, because he'll fill out a little bit. You watch him play, he is thin. He's only 240 at 6'5". He looks like a basketball player playing football. So when you're watching him, you're thinking, okay, is he going to get pushed around? And I didn't really see that. But I was surprised, because when someone's that lanky, he has that wiry strength, where he gets his hands on you and he sets the edge pretty good, much better than I thought he would. But yeah, this is a guy that, as they bring him along slowly, he's not going to be asked to start. They'll probably put him in some pass rush situations. But I think as the year progresses, working with Eric Washington, working with the Bears D-line coach, he will learn how to put this all together. And I think by the end of the year, he's going to be a key part of this D-line rotation.
Yeah, I think, again, this is another guy that can benefit from that first year of professional strength and nutrition program and come in and try to make some strides. All right, we've been at this an hour. I promised that the show would be an hour. We usually try to do this in about an hour. We haven't talked about UDFAs, but I want to give Jacob a chance to tell us his one or two favorite UDFA signings who he thinks has a chance to make the roster. And if you guys are interested in reading about all of these, Lester does a good job of keeping track of all these on the website, windycitygridiron.com. There's a UDFA tracker. So I'm looking at it right now. I can see all of the names, but there's 10 guys here right now. So Jacob, who are the, one or two guys that really jump out? Like, I think that guy can make the roster.
So I think the top guy, at least on my board, is Keith Randolph Jr., the defensive tackle out of Illinois. I feel like he's someone I had a late 5th, early 6th round grade on, and he got an invitation to the Senior Bowl. He got an invitation to the Combine. Those are typically pretty good indicators that you're going to get drafted. So for him to fall out of round 7 and not get selected was a bit surprising to me. I see a guy who's well-rounded. He's smart. He plays his ass off. He's quick off the line of scrimmage. I like him best as a 3-tech, but he can play as a 1-tech. He can kick outside over the tackle as a 5-tech as well. I think that there's solid power there, but I think it's the quickness, the effort with which he plays, and the technical wherewithal. It comes down to the hand usage as well, the moves that he has in order to stack and shed in the run game, the ability to push the pocket as a pass rusher. I think he's got the chance to be a solid rotational defensive tackle. And you look at the Bears roster right now, you have Dexter, Billings, and Pickens. They seem like safe bets to make the roster. That 4th defensive tackle spot's pretty up in the air. So unless they bring in a veteran, somebody who's proven they can play at least at a high backup level, I think Randolph is going to be a favorite of mine to make the team. So, and obviously, him being a local guy, Chicago eats that up, whatever. I want to say, because he was local, he's technically in Illinois, but he's closer to St. Louis. But because he played at Illinois, because he lived in the state of Illinois, he's got the okay. I'm going to call him a local guy, whatever. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I think he's got a good chance. I was a little surprised he went undrafted in the first place. And another guy I wanted to bring up was Theo Beneday, the offensive lineman out of British Columbia. So he's someone that was on my radar last year because he went to the Shrine Bowl. He had a very good outing. He performed well against, current NFLers, and, he held up athletically and physically, but he went back to school for another year. And I feel like, he was on the NFL radar, obviously, but he, didn't get any major college all-star game invites. I don't know what the role was with the Shrine Bowl, because he won the U Sports is Canada's college football. They're essentially the NCAA of Canadian college football. And he won their best down lineman the last 2 years. And, I've said this on shows before. I said this in my Twitter thread about him. But, guys have won that, like David Onyemata, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, Israel Adonijah. And if you remember Matthew Betts, the edge rusher who was on the Bears back in like 2019. I found out he's on the Lions now. He went back to he went back to Canada, played at the CFL for a couple of years, won like their defensive player of the year or something, and now he's in Detroit back in the NFL. So I thought it was a little cool something. But yeah, on tape, Beneday, he's 6'7". He's got shorter arms, so I think he plays guard, but he's naturally a right tackle at UBC with Giovanni Manu being the left tackle, the 4th-round pick from Detroit. You see with Beneday, a very good athlete, someone who's nimble in pass protection, keeps a wide base, keeps quick feet, adjusts his pass sets well, takes good angles, against outside speed rushes. Someone who he's a little bit light for an offensive lineman. He's about 290 for a guy who's 6'7". You'd like to see maybe a little bit more. If he can get up to, even 305, I think 310, 315 should be the goal for him. But that's a process you have to build up to. You can't just gain gain weight and healthy weight that quickly overnight.
Healthy weight. I've done that other piece plenty.
Yeah. Yeah. If he wants to, chow down on, some burgers and Taco Bell, like by all means, he could get there in a heartbeat. But, I think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for him. Maybe not even from a Canadian football to the NFL as much as it is. He needs to gain a little bit of weight, work with an NFL strength and conditioning coach. But he's got the athleticism, he's got the experience, he's got the footwork, and he's got the mean streak too. I think it helps that he's bigger than everybody in Canadian college football, but he also just has that relentless motor, the ability to drive guys and just, bury them. So that's something that I'm very excited about, is just to see how he does in camp and how he does in the preseason. I don't think he makes the team. I think he's a practice squad guy, but I think he's definitely someone worth keeping on the practice squad because he's got some developmental tools to work with, and he's got some versatility along the offensive line. If someone goes down, you need to bring another dude on. I think Beneday is someone worth keeping on the roster. And, ideally, you don't have to play him in year one, but, push comes to shove. You get to see what you have in him. I think he's a good practice squad candidate. He's someone I'm going to have a very firm eye on heading into the preseason training camp because I think he's got the chance to, maybe surprise some people a little bit.
Yeah, again, you hope that you're not putting these guys in positions to have to play meaningful snaps in year one. So, like you said, strength and conditioning program. You hope he gets in. You hope he's a practice squad guy, develops out, and maybe we see down the line. And again, maybe he, like you said, shorter arms. Maybe he projects like he could maybe kick in and work. But that's 6'7" is a pretty tall guy too. So we'd have to see what his bend looks like. You got to see these guys in camp before we can kind of say anything. We got to see them in camp, see how they look against each other. That's my caveat for all of this. But what we're going to do is we're going to close the podcast here. We'll stick around for questions. Jacob, you're free to stick around and answer some. I'm sure a lot of these questions are for you. But Lester, anything popping at the site? Anything you want to promote before we close the pod?
The usual stuff. It's all post-draft stuff this week. I'm going to fire up a roundtable here in the next day or two to get all our guys kind of give their final say to kind of put a cap on the 2024 draft. Jacob, I just want to say, man, outstanding job as always. You killed it the entire draft season, which for you starts like a year ago. So it's like it's nonstop for you. But man, the Bears fans love it. It's just such great content. Learn about these prospects, and like you said, now we're at a point where we can focus on these guys, so it's going to be cool to see how they kind of fit in with the current roster.
No, definitely. And we were talking about it a little bit earlier. I'm just excited to have a handful of guys to focus on rather than, looking at, all right, here are potentially 30, 40 people that might be in contention for the Bears in round 3, or here are, 200 prospects that could be undrafted free agents that I think the Bears should target. So I'm excited. I came away impressed with the Bears haul in the draft. They signed some solid undrafted free agents that I'm excited to watch. There are more guys that I didn't get the chance to break down formally, but there are a handful of dudes that I think could, make some noise in training camp in the preseason. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be a Bears fan. I'm glad that, the fruits of my labor are, I guess, paying off now that I can finally see who the Bears have drafted and have, being able to go back. Oh, I watched that guy. I can check in my notes. So selfishly, I'm happy for that. But, I'm just more than anything, I'm excited for Bears football to come back, especially when there's a level of hope we haven't seen in a while. And I think the last time this happened didn't end well in 2019. But still, that's like 5 years. That's half a decade. A lot of stuff can change in 5 years. We all change in 5 years. So I think it's very exciting to finally have something to be truly excited about. And I think that's what we have this year with the Bears.
Yes, the hopium turned into copium, turned into mopium, but we're back to the hopium, right? Like that's where we're at.
It's full
Excited
circle.
for it. Love you, Jacob. Lester will obviously be back at some point for another podcast. For everybody else out there, till next time, bear down. All right. At some point, I have to eat dinner. Hopefully not putting on unhealthy weight as talked about. But let's we got 100+ comments since I last checked the comments. But, you got any queued up here?
Let's go with the first one. This from our guy Axel, who's out in Sweden. What holes do the Bears still need to fix? 3-tech, center, or some of the suggestions? Jacob, what do you think the Bears are looking at right now to kind of, as the second wave of free agency starting now pretty soon here? So where are the Bears looking?
Yeah, so I think that edge rusher stands out as the biggest need right now. Obviously, you have Montez Sweat, but you don't have that reliable edge number 2. And I think that with the secondary the Bears have, with just the presence of Montez Sweat in general and the expected jumps I'm expecting out of Dexter especially, but Pickens too, I think you can kind of get away with not addressing edge super hardcore at this point. But I do expect it to be a bigger priority in the 2025 offseason, whether it's free agency or, I'd prefer the draft just off of my very early evaluations. I think this is a very good edge rusher class, or it has the potential to be. Obviously, so much can change in a year, but you're looking at, I have 8 guys currently with, very, very tentative grades, but round 1 or round 2 grades in the 2025 draft, rushing off the edge. In this past year, I had just 4. So I think it's a much deeper class. I think there are 2 guys in particular that would be edge rusher number 1 in 2024 if they were eligible. That being James Pierce Jr. Out of Tennessee, and Nick Scourton, the Purdue transfer to Texas A&M. I think either one of those guys would be the top edge in this class. And I think that that's something that I'm sure Poles has kept into consideration to some extent. I mean, obviously you don't always want to go, oh, wait till next year, it's a better class, because so much can change. But I do think that the abundance of talent has to play in some sort of role, along with the fact that if you're taking an edge rusher, or I'd argue a 3 technique at number 9, that's probably not the best value. That's probably not the best player available on the board. Say if you trade down and you took a Byron Murphy or a Leatu Latu, Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, or a Jerzon Newton, sure, that becomes a lot more palatable. But I think if you're staying put, it has to be for a blue chip guy like Rome Odunze. And, luckily that's what Chicago did. So I would say the 3 biggest needs right now in order: edge rusher, center, and then defensive tackle. And I do expect the trenches to be heavily focused on next offseason. Obviously, I haven't done a deep enough look into which free agents are supposed to be available, and so many guys might re-sign or get tagged, whatever. But yeah, I think those are the 3 biggest needs right now. And not all of them are going to be fixed this year, but this is a much more complete team, to the point that I don't think those needs are going to be as exploitable as they were the last couple of years.
every team has some level of hole to some extent, and a hole is kind of a mean thing to say because there's still some good players, but
Yeah.
let's call them like replacement level players. Guys that sometimes the Bears have had players that are below replacement level where you're like, can we just get like a guy that can stand there and not just let be a revolving gate, right? So that happens, but you can also game plan around one weaker part of your line, right? Like you can know like that guy needs a little more help, right? Like we're gonna run our offense in the other direction. Braxton's rookie year, honestly, if you really go back and watch it, a lot of the offense was run away from Braxton. So they didn't ask a lot of him to do a lot of straight up one-on-one blocks like that. They weren't asking a ton out of him, right? And then in year two, they asked a little bit more out of him, right? So those things happen. You can kind of account for some of that stuff. And if as you kind of get inside, a center, Ryan Bates might be good. We don't really know. We don't know what his center tape looks like, but a lot of times centers are asked to kind of lose gracefully, right? They're not necessarily there to be ass kickers. They're there to call the protections, to snap the ball, to help out on double teams. And then if they're in a one-on-one situation, they're kind of losing gracefully and trying to hold up as much as possible. So if you're going to have a weakness, as much as I love centers and can think that they can really take you to the next level, if it turns out that Ryan Bates is the weak link on this offensive line this year, that's not a bad spot for the weak link to be for this year. And let's see what we can get next year. And he might be good. We don't know. He might be good. KK, this is a new name in the comments for us. I kind of like the KK. Talking about Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, saying two high-level character young men. No surprise they found friendship so easily. And I just wanted, like Lester, like these guys, they like each other. They were throwing the football around together. Like they seem to have a connection. Caleb Williams was tweeting out the fact that Odunze was on the flight with him. There kind of seemed to be this like bromance brewing already. I was at the draft experience and I overheard a conversation from a guy who said that he was representing, that he represents Rome Odunze. He was dressed well. He looked like he might be kind of like a younger staffer on whatever, firm might be representing Odunze. And he was like, yeah, I guess I'll probably have to be a Bears fan because, the good chance that the Bears are going to take him. And, like he was just kind of talking like, yeah, it looks like he's going to go to Chicago. And I tweeted it out and people lost their minds. Yeah. And of course, there's some people like, he can't know that. Yeah, I know, man. Like, but it was just the guy that was talking that might have actually been representing Rome. But I think there's something to it, right? Like, I think there's something to these two guys already having a connection that just makes this feel even better.
Well, if you're Caleb Williams, right, and you're about to be the franchise quarterback, you're about to be the first pick overall, wouldn't you let your team know, man, I like this Rome Odunze guy. We have a good connection. I'm not saying he had a say-so in the drafting of him, but what I'm saying is I'm sure he let his feelings know about Odunze, and I'm sure the Bears welcome that because, like you said, this is a different cat, man. This is not just like some guy. He's coming in with that status about him already, and I know that rubs some the wrong way, but that's who he is, and that's what he's going to say.
I thought it was fun. I just like, when else can you see that? There was this movement, Jacob, of these young quarterbacks, and then these teams would draft a wide receiver from their college, like the next year for them. Obviously, the Burrow and Chase thing being one of them, but Hurts got one of his college teammates, right? I mean, there was multiple examples of young quarterbacks, and then they would draft a wide receiver from their team. Tua got one for him, right? So like this happened, and the Bears are like, well, we're not going to do that for USC wide receivers because we don't really like them, but we're going to give you this guy that you seem to have a bond with, and he's in your conference, and you know about him, right? So it just kind of felt like they accelerated the plan of putting that high level wide receiver with that quarterback prospect just right away. Hey, this worked for other teams. Let's just do it right now.
Yeah, and I mean, if they want to go down that approach, I mean, maybe a change of scenery will be helpful for Mario Williams, who he played with for 2 years at USC and 1 year at Oklahoma. Only played in one game in 2023, but Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think this is the best bet that you have, especially, you don't have a star receiver coming out of USC this year by any means. You have someone who, obviously there's some connection there. They get along. Obviously, they both got to see each other play firsthand being in the Pac-12. So, yeah, I mean, I think this makes all the sense in the world, and there's going to be an opportunity for them to build chemistry, and the fact that they've worked out together, the fact that Odunze has already worked out with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, the fact that Caleb's already thrown to those guys, I think that's a step in the right direction. So I think that just ultimately from a chemistry perspective, not even including just the the sheer talent that you're bringing in, I think from a chemistry perspective, that selection makes all the sense in the world.
This might be the last one here. Again, just because we've gone way over time, but it's always fun talking to Jacob about this stuff. But anything you would have done differently if you were polls? And I will start, and I will say, I received multiple texts, including one from our good friend Robert Schmitz, who said, "This is the perfect JB draft, isn't it? Like this, you got the guy that you wanted, you got your franchise quarterback, you got your wide receiver that you wanted, you got a developmental offensive lineman, and you got your punter from Iowa. Could you possibly have dreamed up anything better?" And I'm like, yeah, I mean, no, I can't think of a better draft. And then, of course, a developmental defensive lineman, great. Like that's just icing on the cake. But Jacob, is there any point where you're like, I might have pivoted, I might have done something different? Anything that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, so I do think that's a good question. And obviously, if I'm picking at 122 overall, would I have picked Tory Taylor? Probably not. But again, like I'm very happy with that pick. I understand why the pick was made. I'm just more so looking for other players. I guess I can go down to players that were available in round 6, round 7 that the Bears didn't try and trade up for, which again, that's bold, but you have all these draft picks, especially on day 3 heading into the 2025 draft. I would have liked to see if they could maybe throw a pick in there for Christian Mahogany, the guard out of Boston College, who ended up again with Detroit. So love that, I guess. But, or, trading up for Taj Washington, trading he ended up going 241, I think somewhere in the, that's pretty late in the 7th round. So I would have considered, maybe throwing a little something in there. I don't know what the value would have been, but I think that Taj Washington had no business being there at 241. And you want to go back to the USC connection. That's Caleb Williams' top target. I think it wouldn't have hurt necessarily to make a move up for that. But I think this is all nitpicking on my end. I think that they crushed the first 2 picks. The 3rd pick was one of the highest overall players on my board at the time that they selected him. Tory Taylor, I don't want to say generational because that's, hyperbole, I feel like, but
that's a trigger word for some Bears fans out there.
Yeah. Someone's going to throw a fit if I say that. So I'm going to say one of the best punting prospects in the 21st century, which is still a little hyperbolic, but I genuinely believe it's true with Tory Taylor. And then you're also getting a high upside developmental edge rusher. I mean, you can't do much better than that. So sure, there's stuff I might have done differently, but at the same time, this is an A draft, despite what Mel Kiper will say, this is an A draft, and I can't possibly be persuaded otherwise.
Love it. Lester, any final thoughts?
No, I'm the same way. I mean, if you look at the draft as a whole, I was a little surprised at the punter pick, obviously, because it's a punter, but you're like, that's probably where he should have went. I mean, he brings that kind of value to the team. I mean, at the end of the day, this is still a Matt Eberflus defensive team. Now, we hope he does not keep his conservative approach, because now he has a legitimate offense that can do some stuff for him. So hopefully he doesn't use the punter as a crutch. But I think he'll be fine. I think they're going to be good here. I like all the other picks they made. High upside from the tackle, from the edge. I'm excited, man. It's let's end it on a high note, because I would do nothing different than what Ryan Poles did.
Pretty good. Pretty good consensus there. So, hey, everybody, thanks for joining us on the live stream. We really appreciate it. We have a lot of fun. We do this on Mondays during the year. We're recapping all the games. Of course, if they play a Monday night game, we do it on Tuesday. But Lester and I hang out all the time. We'll try to do a little more of the interview stuff, bring other people on, and kind of do this again. We'll get a different background so we don't ruin the beautiful Bear and Balanced background that we have. But really appreciate it. And it's time for excitement, guys. Like, we've gotten through all the BS of the pre-draft stuff. The draft is completed. It was a good draft. We feel really good about it. We got another, 4+ months before we actually see some real football on the field, but we're getting there. Like, getting past the draft's always that big moment. Go, enjoy the summer, touch some grass, do those things, and certainly we'll see you at the Hall of Fame game, and we'll celebrate some of the great players of the past. And we'll get into this, what we hope is the start of something new and great for the Chicago Bears. So until next time, thanks everybody. Bear down.